Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to take you through my collection of Yoko Ono records. So I did a review of Season of Glass separately a couple of years ago, but I thought I'd show you my whole collection, and I've also done an interview of how I was lucky enough to meet Yoko, so I'll mention that briefly, but if you want to see details of that, go to the other video. So I've included this wedding album because it's a John and Yoko collaboration, and the album's not much, but the highlight of this is the press cuttings booklet, which is a pretty good indicator of how racist the British press was at the time anyway. Good cartoons by famous cartoonists of the day, taking the mickey, as cartoonists tend to do, and this is the album. As I say, not much, don't listen to it at all, but the interview, I suppose, the interview side is quite interesting, piece of wedding cake, and then some pictures, and actually this folds out into a poster, which is quite nice, and you've got some photo booth snapshots, and then if you want the lyrics or the information in Japanese, it's here. And so quite a lot of goodies in here, and I picked this up just after John died because I thought I should have everything. And as I say, musically it's not much, but it's quite a fun package, more rewarding than Unfinished Music number 1 and 2 for sure. And then we have Yoko's companion to Plastic Ono Band from 1970, released at the same time as John's album, with an almost identical front cover. As you can see, John and Yoko have changed positions here. Pretty fascinating, quite rare this one, and with Yoko as a child on the back. And identical design in terms of the inner sleeve and the credits. So Yoko, John, Ringo and Klaus on here. And Mal Evans is credited as providing salad as opposed to tea and sympathy, which is quite an interesting piece of trivia for you there. So that's her first album. First proper album, anyway. I mean, she'd been doing avant-garde stuff throughout the second half of the 60s, but I think that's her sort of solo debut, really. And then this one from 1971, a double album, which came out on Apple, and good. These Apple albums of whether it be Yoko or Mary Hopkin were pretty much collector's items, and still are. Nice sleeve notes here, and you get Yoko's face, like same as the Imagine album, with the half-sliced apple there, so very much mimicking the Imagine design. And then I like the lyrics to here with the New York skyline, so that's pretty interesting. Again, the same apple sleeve. So I think I picked up this one in Notting Hill Gate at my favourite record shop. I can't remember how much I paid for it, but it wasn't particularly cheap. That's Fly, and then next comes probably my favourite other than Season of Glass, this one, 1972, when same year that John and Yoko released Sometime in New York City, but Yoko also, on top of that, released a double album. And maybe double albums were the fad at the time, because George had put out a triple and John and Yoko put out a double. This is Yoko's second double, and Road Race Speedway, as we know, was going to be a double. So it was a bit of a trend at the time. This one is on the sort of slightly different Yoko apple there, with the sliced apple there on the back. Again, this wasn't particularly cheap, but I was very happy to find it. It's all part of the Beatles collection, Beatle fans collection, should I say. And this is down near the river near the Hudson River in Manhattan. I forget exactly. I think it's Bank Pier it's called. And the same picture on the back there. So at the time when they lived on Bank Street, which is down in Greenwich Village, we visited it there when me and my sons, when we were in New York. It was fascinating. It's where they did all the wiretapping and followed him around and hassled him. I think Dylan lived there for a while as well. It's quite a trendy part of New York where, as Lennon said, all the poets and the artists tend to hang out. So this is probably one to recommend if you're interested in seeking out Yoko's stuff. I think the opening track, Yang Yang, is outstanding. It's also got Now or Never, which is a nice anthem. And Want My Love to Rest Tonight is on here. And then whilst we're on that subject, because Elephant's Memory were the backing band for Yoko on that album, so I'll just show you this Elephant's Memory album, produced by John and Yoko. Familiar faces you'll recognize probably from the Sometime New York City cover and sleeve, and then the Live in New York concert. This is not a bad album. I don't really play it very often, but it's nice to have on Apple. I think he had to let them go. They were on his payroll for a while, and then he had to let them go because he wasn't going to tour anymore, and they were getting too expensive. But I don't think they parted on particularly acrimonious grounds. Good memories for all, I think. This is from '73, Feeling the Space, which this one is often described as her feminist album because the songs are really almost exclusively about women's struggle in society. It's got the words here, and this is a US copy, the US Apple. So that's that. It's got Men, Men, Men here, which is quite a fun track. And John is guesting on guitar on all of these albums, not on every track, but on a few. Then there was an aborted album called The Story, which we'll come to later, but which was left on the shelf from '74. And then Season of Glass came out after Double Fantasy, after John died, and I've done a separate review on this. This is just a brilliant album, absolutely staggering. It's on Geffen. And then, of course, Walking on Thin Ice was a big single, and that's on the CD version of Season of Glass, but it was left off the album. This is from 1982, It's All Right. The lyrics. By this time, Yoko was on Polydor, I think. Yeah, Polydor. This album's okay, but it's getting a bit too synthesizer-y in its sound. I prefer her when she's got the good old-fashioned bass and drums, guitar. There's a couple of good tracks on here. Loneliness is decent, but as we'll see, that comes from an earlier album. And then this one is not a Yoko album, but it's a tribute to Yoko, which came out in 1984, which has got all these people doing cover tracks of Yoko. Like John Lennon does Everybody, not Everybody, sorry. Every Man Has a Woman Who Loves Him, but it's not actually a solo version. It's the backing track of the Double Fantasy recording with Yoko's vocal taken off, so it's just John's backing vocal made to seem like a live lead vocal, which doesn't really succeed, but it's quite interesting. But that's how they've done that. Harry Nilsson is on here with 3 tracks: Silver Horse, Dream Love, and Loneliness. But by this stage of Harry's career, his voice was giving out, and it wasn't really one of his. None of these are his top performances at all. He'd lost the beauty in his voice, unfortunately, by this stage. Walking on Thin Ice, interesting version by Elvis Costello and the Attractions. Roberta Flack does a nice version of Goodbye Sadness. We've got the 9-year-old Sean Lennon doing a version of It's All Right. And we've got Klaus Voormann's band Trio doing a version of Wake Up, which is quite interesting. Eddie Money is on here doing a Moving On. It's quite interesting album to have. Not essential, maybe. And then 1985 is the last vinyl I have, Star Piece, which had an unexpected hit. Hell in Paradise was a hit, and she made a video for it. It's okay. It's a little bit, again, a little bit too disco-y for my liking. Then on CD I've got from all the reissues. I've got Fly, A Story, which was this aborted album from '74, which is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, because Loneliness is on here from It's Alright from '82, with probably a superior version in my opinion. And then Hard Times Are Over is on here with a weird rhythm on the drums, which doesn't really work. So I think they must have seen the potential in this song and went back to it on Double Fantasy, and it's much more successful on Double Fantasy than it is here, but it's interesting to see. There's a number of good tracks on here. Dogtown from Season of Glass was originated on here, improved upon on Season of Glass in my opinion. So this was a bunch of unreleased stuff waiting to be re-recorded, some of which she did, some of which she didn't. And then this album was released in its own right eventually. I've got this on CD, mainly, I'm not going to show you, but mainly interesting for the pictures of John's hospital room wall, where he's put the White Album pictures on the wall. Wedding album on CD, Season of Glass, again with Walking on Thin Ice as a bonus track, and also a harrowing version of I Don't Know Why, recorded the night of John's murder. Just her on the mic, or recorded in bed. It looks like she's half crying, and it's quite moving, not very easy listening at all. Then we've got this album from '96, Rising, which is actually a decent album, probably her best latter-day album. Sean Lennon is guesting on guitar, and there's some good tracks on here. Revelations, the last track, is excellent, and Turn the Corner has got some great guitar from Sean, so I recommend that one. I picked up this one, Blueprint for a Sunrise. I was starting to lose interest here, well, not much on this album, which grabbed me. And then this is a recent album of her doing versions of her own stuff with all these modern people, and it's fairly dispensable, I'm afraid. But let's go back and admire Yoko's great stuff. Oh, I just want to show you this, sorry. The Ono box, ooh, crumbs. The Ono box, which came out in '96, I think it was, and contains London Jam, New York Rock, Run, 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 A Story, the aborted album, Kiss, Kiss, Kiss with tracks from Double Fantasy period, No, No, No from Season of Glass period, and then an excellent booklet with all kinds of information on who plays. It's actually falling to bits, this whole box set, which is a good thing in a way, because it means it's been used, but it's not in mint condition, let's put it that way. But anyway, so Yoko, yeah, not everyone's cup of tea, and I don't absolutely adore her stuff, but I do think there's some stuff worth exploring over the years, and particularly nice to have the Apple albums. And thank you for watching. See you next time.